So would I need to have all of my own gear? Really? Sometimes they provide the equipment. Interesting. Oh, hey there, listeners. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm the host of the show, Casey Fatchett. If this is your first time listening, in addition to providing informative and entertaining photography and business-related content, I also go on adventures with the crew of the starship Fibonacci. They're my hashtag nerdy photo crew. Right now, we're in a spaceport, and I'm talking to Ragomir here about getting into the bounty hunter business. It seems so glamorous and fun. Ragomir says it is neither glamorous nor fun. On this episode of the podcast, luxury wedding photographer Leandro da Silva is back, and we're talking about how to get into the wedding photography business. This is one of the most requested topics I get. So many DMs and emails asking me when we're going to do an episode, how to get into the wedding photo industry. Well, here it is. You're welcome. Be sure to stick around after the break for my conversation with Leandro. So how's the pay, Ragomir? Oh, well, that certainly makes up for it not being glamorous or fun. This episode of the Nerdy Photographer Podcast is brought to you by USB Memory Direct. USB Memory Direct has been providing custom USB flash drives and packaging to photographers and businesses for over 15 years. They offer over 50 styles of USB flash drives with a broad range of customization options, always ensuring a drive that suits your brand and budget. Simply select a drive that fits your aesthetic and then customize it. Included with every order are USB 3 options for lightning fast transfer speeds, free printing or laser engraving of your logo, a lifetime warranty for complete peace of mind, free standard shipping to the US and Canada, rush shipping available, and Pantone color match shells to stay perfectly on brand. Check them out at usbmemorydirect.com. That's usbmemorydirect.com. Use the code NERDY10, that's all capital letters, NERDY10, to receive 10% off your order. That's for USB drive orders only, and discounts cannot be combined and can only be used once. I just wanted some information. We're just gathering it. We'll get back to you in a couple of weeks.
We're shopping around. I'm like, all right, shopping.
Okay, because that's your deal. Go ahead. I'm very clear. I'm like, I won't be holding the date. Like, I
don't hold dates, and I don't tell them unless they ask. They're like, oh, can you? I'm like, unfortunately, the way this business is, I don't hold dates. Sometimes I even, if they insist, I'm like, and then it's happened like years ago where I used to like, oh, they seem like they're going to book, or let me just hold this date. And then I hold it. And then I reach, hey, what's going on? And like, oh yeah, we decided to go somewhere, a different direction. I'm like, but you told me to hold the date. You never told me.
Right.
So that's why, it's like one of those things when you start off, you start learning. You learn things, sometimes through experience of your own or of others,
Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am your host, Casey Fatchett, and with me today, returning guest, Leandro da Silva. Welcome, Leandro.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure. It was a good time last time, and it's going to be a good time.
Hopefully, we'll increase the level of enjoyment this time around. We're going to be talking about how to get into the wedding photography industry, but before we do that, we have to roll the dice and see what we're going to talk about before that.
All right.
Oh, it's a 3. Worst experience as a photographer on a shoot.
Oh man, worst experience. Wow. I guess there's a couple times where different parts of the business and client. Well, I would have to be definitely in terms of working at a venue. I had once in the middle. This was the cake cutting. So in the middle of the cake cutting, they had this kind of flambe show going on, and the venue makes it a big thing. They're proud of it. And this, I think she was new, bridal attendant or venue employee decides to continue to stay in front of the couple while I'm photographing this whole entire show. So during the whole entire thing, I can't see the couple. I on base show, but I don't see the couple, and I'm trying to tell this employee, hey, can you move out of the way, and hands gestures and signs, and she continues to just to be in my way, and I was able to get nothing. And then luckily my second photographer was able to get like a side angle, but without getting really the flambe show. So I was able to still get that. But then, at the end, I just kind of, went over nicely to the employee. I'm like, hey, you were in front of the couple the whole entire time. And I was trying to get your attention to move. And she just turns around. She's like, oh, not even sorry. No, nothing, just walks away. So that's something that always stood in my head. And I was upset because, it's one of those things where I like working with people that are always on the same page. And 99% of the time, everybody is on the same page. And when someone at a venue, which is, really well-known venue in the area,
I know which one it is.
Their employees would be, their training or, it was definitely a one-off thing. But that was something that kind of always stuck to me. I'm like, man, that's why it's so important to work with vendors who align with what you do and your beliefs and your level of customer service, because there's so many crazy situations that I hear on these Facebook groups and other photographers talk about, and I never want to experience any of those things. So that's why sometimes it's good to say no.
Yeah, I mean, I know exactly which. I'm pretty sure I'll ask you afterwards. But I'm pretty sure I know exactly which venue you're talking about, because as soon as you said flambe show, I'm like, oh, I think I know which one that is.
Because there's a couple.
There are a couple, but it's just like that. I think I know which one you're talking about. And I mean, there's a lot of weird things that happen. I know guys, I'm friends with people who have an entire podcast devoted to crazy things that have happened or weird things that have happened, not just at weddings, but just while people are shooting. But as wedding photographers, here's my transition into our topic for this discussion. There's a lot of things that happen that I don't think people realize when they get into wedding photography. What's gonna happen? Before we really delve into the meat of the discussion, I have a question. I asked for questions from listeners, and we have one from listener and a guest, Stephen Van Elk from the Wedding Photo Hangover podcast. And he said, why would you want to get into wedding photography? Which I think is a really interesting question, because I can say at different points in my career, I've felt differently about wedding photography. I don't know. What's your answer to that question?
It's one of those questions where I don't think, for me specifically, I'd never, thought, hey, I want to be a wedding photographer, or I want to get into weddings or anything like that. Because those people, I think that say that they want to get into wedding photography, it's, there's only really one answer for that is, oh, I want to make more money. So wedding photography is one of those niches that, that you can make more money. But for me, it was definitely not like that. It was just kind of like experimenting and trying to get, see what I liked. And then, my first wedding was, I didn't go out looking for the wedding. Someone asked me, hey, can you shoot my wedding 4 weeks before the wedding? And hey, I like, what you did with those baby photos that you did, that family session you did, and show up to the wedding, and, no contract, no discussion of payment. And then I just kind of like, oh, I'm going to put this online on Facebook. And it's kind of, snowballed from there. And then, then that's when I started doing my research. I'm like, what is it? Like, what's wedding photography, and that's when I came across some great photography. I came across Fearless photographers. And that was like, wow, this is wedding photography, because my idea of wedding photography was totally different. It was like, the cheesy, your parents, album, it's like, hey, everybody look at the camera, not many photos, because again, it was different time. And just, really for me, there was no excitement in that photography. So when I looked at Fearless, when I saw these images, I'm like, holy shoot, this is amazing. This doesn't look like wedding photography. Yeah, these people are at a wedding, yes, they're getting married, but this is exciting, you know. So that's what kind of got me interested in weddings, and I'm like, oh, I want to do these type of weddings, and and with me with no prior apprenticeship or I know no second shooting experience, no assisting experience, and we could get into that later why. But I just kind of like, what, I'm gonna do this on my own. And I looked at, I Googled other wedding photographers that, and whoever I kind of liked, and I just looked more into their work. And, then I took workshops, seminars, and it's kind of, that's how it's been ever since. Every year I try to take, a handful of workshop with people who I respect, who I like their work. Not necessarily I want to copy their work, but there's something about their work that attracts me, and I want to learn how they do it, and try to apply it to me. And I'm at the point where I'm at the point where I'm not looking at wedding photographers in a sense. I'm looking at other photographers in other genres of photography. Let it be like, a kid photographer or a commercial photographer, or maybe, even now, like looking at some of these landscape photographers and these geo guys, those are the things that I'm like seeing. I look at what they do and see how can I add something to my photography, my wedding photography business, and offer something different to my couples. Because, that's what excites me, I want to give them something a little different, because I really enjoy doing, those dramatic portraits that I do. So, that's why my couples book me. If I shoot a wedding and I'm not able to do a dramatic portrait, I don't want to shoot that wedding.
Right. That's what you enjoy about it.
Yeah, there's like, even if you tell me, hey, Leo, I'll give you $10,000, you just have to, shoot this all documentary, all documentary, no posing, no nothing, no, all ambient. I won't do it. I just won't, because there's no excitement for me. I do wedding photography because there's an excitement for me. I know, like, okay, I'm shooting at this venue. I want to shoot at this location. And my couples are on the same level of excitement as I am. Because
Right.
That's something that's important. Where I think where there becomes a lot of issues is when you and your couple are not on the same level of expectations. And then, like, your couple might be like, oh, I really don't want to do this. I just need a wedding photographer. And then you're like, no, I want to do this. And then that's where kind of like, as a photographer, you probably get upset or like, hey, I under delivered. But, you have to really find, that couple that aligns with you. And I think it's so important. And I think I've done that pretty well.
I would agree.
Maybe, a handful of couples over the years that maybe I'm like, maybe I should have that maybe that was a red flag. I should have, said no to this couple. But, for the most part, my couples are amazing. They're aligned with me. Like some of the bridal party photos that I do, I set the expectation. Tell them, look, it's not going to take. It's not a 1, 2, 3. It's like,
Right.
you got 30 people in your bridal party. It's going to take me 15 minutes just to set them up.
I think
Setting the expectation with them, and then just letting them know. And then some of them tell me straight up, like, Leo, I only want one photo of a whole bridal party. Just give me one photo. Give me this dramatic bridal party photo. And I'm like, all right, that's, that aligns with what I want. And sometimes I'm like, you know what, we'll get a really quick photo, like everybody together, and kind of break up this pose, and we do that. But that's when, like, that you and your couples are aligned, because then that avoids a lot of those issues where, like, oh, you didn't follow my my photo list, or my Pinterest board that I sent you, because you hear them, we hear them all the time, like, oh my God, my photographer didn't deliver what I wanted, or I don't like my wedding photos. And I think a lot of that can be avoided if we all, if a lot of photographers are on the same page as their couple, and not guessing to that just to kind of make the booking.
You brought up a number of interesting things, and I agree. I think you really do an excellent job of connecting with the people who want what you provide and the thing that you enjoy doing. You do an excellent job of connecting with that. And I was showing some of your reels from Instagram to a friend of mine who I've known, like, who's also a photographer. He photographed my wedding, And I showed him, he's like, man, these shots got to take forever. And then it's like to put together, it's got to be like 20 minutes, 20. And I was like, yeah, it's got to set all that stuff up. And you're only doing, a couple of them maybe
Yeah.
in a day. But like that is the expectation you set with a couple. I think there were a few things there that you touched on. One of the things was, and I want to further answer Stephen's original question was, why would you want to get into doing wedding photography? And I think that he meant that in two ways. Like, what is it that, you enjoy about it? Also, it's hard. It's not
Oh,
like
definitely.
when you think about this, it's like it is, and something I didn't realize. My own story of getting into wedding photography was this was a dinosaur, was like, taking my film camera to weddings of friends of mine and, taking a couple of photos, like a roll or two of pictures, at their weddings, early on in my 20s. And, they would come back to me and say like, oh, these are, I'd pick out a couple of them, blow them up and send them in a couple 8x10s. And they'd be like, oh, these are better than the photos are the guy we paid took. And I was like, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll look into that. And then, Craigslist, when Craigslist was still like an option, I was like, hey, I'll photograph your wedding. Let's talk. And I just posted something and I got, response. And the same thing. It was like 3 weeks or 4 weeks later. And it was out in New Jersey. I was living in New York. They're like, hey, you want to come shoot our wedding? And I was like, all right. And I did it. And I personally just fell in love with as a former actor, like I just the sort of like it is much like a performance in a way. There's like kind of a script. You're following a timeline
Yep.
for the day, but there's a lot of improvisation and things going on. It's very much, and I found over the years a lot of people that I've met, like wedding planners and makeup artists and stuff, former theater people. That was the thing that we got out of it, was like there's sort of like there's the pressure of the performance, but it's also like it's kind of, there is a script that you're following and you kind of know how things are going to go. But yeah, it is long hours generally.
Yeah.
It is, your weekends start to disappear. It's one of those things that my wife and I talked about, especially early on in our relationship. It was hard because, she just wouldn't see me she'd be like, oh, on the weekend, because she was working during the week. And, we'd have to find times during the week to hang out, or on weekends that I wasn't working. And May would hit and she'd be like, yep, see you in October. And it's one of those things, I think, that people who get into this, or when they start out in it, they're not necessarily thinking like, oh, these are some sacrifices that I am going to have to make,
Yeah.
or balance things in my life so that I'm not just like, I'm not losing one of the things that I think about as I'm getting older is like, I do want to spend more time with, family, friends on the weekend. So I'm being more particular about what weddings I take. And that's something I think that you need to figure out. It would be helpful if you figured it out earlier on. I think when you're just getting into it, you're not quite sure about it, but like something to be aware of. Also, it is a customer service job
Of course.
as well.
100%.
I think that people get into this sometimes thinking that, oh, this is just going to be about taking pictures. It's like, no, I'm only going to work on the weekends. No, it is not. You're going to be spending a lot of time during the week communicating with people, trying to get the next job, and all of that fun stuff, managing your social media. So it's just things to be aware of when you're going to get into it, because I think that I've seen personally, I mean, you've been in what, 10, 11 years?
I think 12 years now. 12.
Yeah, I've been doing it
Yeah,
for
2000 was my first one. Was 2011. So 12 years.
12 years. I've been doing it. This is going to be 23 in May. And in the first few years where I was like doing like 5,
Yeah.
6 weddings a year. I wasn't really jumping into it like heavy for the first couple of years, but I've seen it sort of go like to when we hit digital full on and cameras became a little less expensive and there were more people like coming into the wedding photography industry. I started to see people like bailing after 5 years because they just didn't want to do it anymore. But I think that's because they didn't realize, oh yeah, I'm going to be spending a lot of my time doing other things.
Yeah.
I'm not.
And I think that's what you see a lot. And I think you still see a lot of people starting out, hey, I'm a new photographer. And, I see this in groups where I'm not in a lot of groups, but I try to avoid, because again, a lot of groups can take a lot of your time. Like
Yeah.
it's like a black hole, like it just sucks you in. So I try to avoid, like most recently, like last couple of years, just kind of, go in there, kind of, see what's going on. But I see a lot of these newer photographers coming in, and they're around for a couple of years, and then they're gone, or they're, because you see them like, oh, I'm selling my equipment, or you see them, or if you're friends with them, they've moved on. Because I think, nobody really, there's no blueprint, there's no book. Hey, here's this book, read this book, and you'll have a successful photography career. You'll photograph people for 25 years and then you can retire. It's not really that way.
Yeah.
It's something where it's kind of like, I think, I speak for majority of people. It's like you go into this a lot of times not wanting to do a specific genre. You fall into it, you find a love or an interest that in a certain genre that you like, and you run with it. And I would say it's almost like a bell curve, because there's the ups and there's the downs, and then when you're down, it's how do you recover from it. It's you make changes, and I think a lot of times when newer photographers come in and they hit that bottom, they either regroup and find out, what do I have to do to fix this, or that's their exit. They're like, okay, this is my exit, and I'm leaving. And I what you said about the hours is definitely true. It's, you're working, the majority of the time more than 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
and like, this past year, 2020, I had an Indian wedding, which it was one day was 17 hours.
Yeah. Those are
So
long.
just one day.
Or I've found certain Asian cultural weddings, like where you have the tea service at like 5 a.m. And then it's just like, we're going to do this. And then it's like, this is like the same thing as, like Indian weddings, where like 3 days of that stuff, you get real tired. Especially if they're,
it's not just the physical, it's the mental part of tired. And it's like I say, I tell people I like the weddings because there's like an adrenaline. There's like you're running on this adrenaline, and like you said, there is a timeline that you're following. But at any given moment, that timeline could be thrown out the window,
Right.
and you just got to improvise and run with what's handed to you. Because there's so many little factors that can throw off a day. And one thing I always go over with my couples is making sure hair and makeup know what time they have to be done, because that could throw off your day right away from the beginning.
Yeah, when you start off running late, it's really hard to catch up, and I find that's usually the place where we lose time, and I'm trying to catch up, like trying to gain time back during family and wedding party portraits.
Yeah, family usually. All right,
I'm going to try to get
30 minutes for family. I'm going to cut this down to 10 minutes because I'm going to get this done really quick.
Right, so we can gain some time back for you here in the schedule. I think another thing you mentioned about your, like, what you're doing, and I've done this as well, is like the way to avoid like the sort of burnout on it is those things, finding the things that excite you, and like I said, working on those weddings that you really identify with the couple. You're both, on the same page. They really love the thing that excites you about it, because that way you, like you said, it keeps it fresh, and it keeps keeps yourself going at it for a long period of time. Otherwise, you're working with people who are sort of like clashing with what it is you liked about this, with the reason you got into it and decided, I'm going to make this my thing. And if somebody's just sort of beating that down all the time, you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. You find yourself sort of, listless, and like, this is not getting the same energy. Because I've had a couple of times where I've sort of cut off, like, I don't want to do this stuff anymore. So like, once somebody says this is the thing that I'm all about, and I'm like, nope, I don't think we're a good fit for each other, you should call this person because they do that and they're really good at it. See you later. And
I'm a big believer in showing what you want to shoot. If you like, and this is something that I learned this very I think I was lucky, because this is definitely luck, where like I found certain photographers, and I took workshops with certain photographers that they instill that from, like, show what you want to shoot, show what you feel is your best work, and just don't show work to show. Like, oh,
Right.
I have, because, like they say, you're as good as your weakest photo. So just don't fill your
Don't bloat the
Instagram
portfolio.
or your portfolio with photos just to show things that you want to show. And then that's where I started right away. Like, I remember my first couple of years, maybe 2-3 years, I was photographing, like, because the whole thing, like, photograph the food, right? Like,
Right.
and then I'm like, oh no, like I hated that. Like I hated, but I did it because that's what like they wanted. So then I get to a point where, like, you know what? With all these new clients, I'm gonna show them. I'm not gonna show them food. I'm not gonna show them food. I'm not. So I get to a point where, like, now people don't even ask. Like if they do, like, hey, are you photographing? I'm like, I don't photograph the food because during the cocktail hour time, one, your guests are eating. I don't want to bother them from eating, and two, I'm photographing things that you probably want more important, like your centerpieces and your ballroom and all those other things, setting up lighting. So and they understand. So I'm able to kind of, unless it's like there's some specific reason why they want me to photograph something, I'll photograph it. But like I won't photograph food. I won't, I don't, there's certain things that, like, it's not that I just don't want to. It's just that, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't excite me. And I want my couples to be excited to what I just don't want to, at the end of where I'm trying to go with this is, like, I don't want to book a client that I don't want to do things that just for the paycheck.
Right.
Because I think a lot, and again, sometimes when, you got family to feed, you got mortgage, sometimes maybe you have to make those tough decisions. But I think there's things that you can do if you're in the game early enough, and that you can then, if you are in the game long enough, you can start making corrections to get away from those things by, again, not yesing clients to death. Oh yeah, do you I like what you're doing, but do you edit any differently, or do you do light and airy?
Right.
And that's a hard no. Like, no, this is exactly what you get.
This is my style.
Yeah, it's my style. And if we don't align, that's fine. You seem nice. You can find many good photographers out there that'll do the light and airy for you. And that's fine. Or there's couples ask, I want unlimited hours or something. I'm like, okay, unfortunately, I don't do unlimited hours. If that's what you want, there's many photographers out there that will do something for you. And that's where I think setting that expectation, because I've had then couples come back, I guess through their own research they've come to a conclusion, like, oh yeah, there's no such thing as unlimited hours, or they didn't find anyone. So, like, and then you educate them a little bit, but I don't want to educate them to the point where I'm convincing them about booking me. I'm just telling them, hey, this is what it is. I'm giving them good information. You process the information, and then you decide what's the best scenario for you. And if, like I said, if I think it's a red flag, I'm like, unfortunately, I don't feel like this is a right fit. And actually, I thought about something. Your question previously, I actually had a client that actually said that during their engagement session, and I told them that we weren't the right fit because they, there was something that they didn't. I'm not going to go too much detail, but there was something that they didn't like, and I'm like, that's what I showed you. That's my portfolio. I'm like, oh yeah, but we love your work. They started, they kind of, I guess, understood where I was going with this, and I'm like, I might, I don't think we're the right fit. I'll give you your retainer back. It's not an issue. I just don't want, if this is not what you want, I want to make sure that, that you're happy for your wedding day, because on your wedding day, it's one of the most important days of your wedding. And I want you to be extremely happy with your photos. And they're like, no, we're sorry. It was miscommunication. And I had a feeling that this was just like, it wasn't going to work out. But, all right, I was clear with it. I put it on paper, I put it on a message. And behold, I shoot their wedding. And then right away, she's like, like I sent the gallery, and I think like 5 minutes later, I get a text message or email. Hey, these images are missing. This is missing. This is missing. This is missing. And I'm like, what is she talking about? Like, everything is there.
Right.
And then I had to go in there and screenshot every single photo, send it to her. Look, these are all the images you said that were missing. 2 days later, I get a text message from the groom, like, oh my God, thank you so much. The photos were amazing. I'm sorry. And like, all that stress and that headache that I dealt with, like those 3 days, were not worth, whatever they paid me.
Yeah.
and I saw that red flag in their engagement session, and I told them, look, we're not the right fit, maybe, and they insisted. So next time, like, I learn from your mistakes. If I see it, I'm gonna just I'm like, look, I'll give you all your money back, complimentary engagement session on me, but it's not, I want to avoid, any issues as much as I can, because it's not worth it. It's not worth the money that they paid you, the headache, and then, if they leave you a bad review, especially now, it's so easy for someone to go on Google, on Yelp, and leave you a bad review because, small businesses, we, it's not everything, but it is everything.
Yeah. They can hurt your reputation quite easily. And yeah, I know not to ask people where I think it was kind of on touch and go, where I'm not sure whether or not they had a good experience. And there's not that many of them in my career, but like, I don't even bother to ask those people for reviews because I normally like do a reach out and ask people. It's funny he mentioned that. Like, I would say, like, yeah, watch out for those red flags. I learned later on in my career, I would say probably 12 years ago, probably around the time, like close to the time you were starting yours, like, yeah, stop taking pictures of things that you don't want to do. We have very different approaches. I'm very much a candid photographer. When it comes to the portraits, I want to take some time with the couple, get some beautifully lit photos. I'm more of a prompter than a poser. And that's my style. But I was always posting these like wedding party photos and, things, because people would always say, well, I need to get those photos. And instead I should have just been like, yeah, I take those. And if you want to see some, I will show you some. But like putting them all over my website, it was just like, like people then were very much like, I was getting people who were like, I want to spend, an hour just on, family photos and wedding party shots. And I'm like, that's not really the stuff that I enjoy doing. I enjoy working with just the couple and, getting very natural reactions from them. And when we do the wedding party stuff, whatever, I go through it very efficiently, try to get them through it, and also like set things up. I mean, we'll do like set up shots and like things like that, but that is not the driving force behind what I enjoy about the day.
And that's true, because like, even like I've had couples where they tell me, oh yeah, I really don't want to do any family photos. I had one bride tell me like, hey, I really don't need, we don't need the family photos. And then that's when I stop. I'm like, oh no, hold on. You need family photos.
You do want some. There are some must-haves.
And yeah, it's a must-have. And then I think sometimes like couples get, maybe so excited about family photo, like not family, about their wedding, that they don't see, the end result. Like, look, these, you need family photos, because sometimes, a lot of times from my experience, I've been to weddings where the last photo of that person was a photo I took. Right. And those photos become very, very valuable. And I had this conversation with them. It's like, oh my God, Leo, you're totally right. Of course, yeah, we need the photos. And those are the things, like, even I make it a point when on the wedding day to make sure if there's grandparents or like older aunts and uncles, because I've gotten to a point where I see someone and the couple didn't tell me, oh, I have a grandmother. Because I do ask, like, on my questionnaire, hey, do you have any grandparents? Do you, is there anyone you really want to take a photo with?
Yep.
And they, for some reason, they forget, or they don't have that close of a relationship with that person. I go and I'm like, hey, are you, what's your relationship to the couple? And if they say, oh, like, I've had it where, I think I told you the story the last time. I'm like, it was like, I think like almost 100-year-old grandmother standing on the side of the dance floor with the uncle. And this was probably like 8 years ago. And, she's just kind of like,
bopping around.
Right. And I go and I'm like, oh, to the uncle, I'm like, hey, who is that, his aunt? Because, they told me that they didn't tell me they had grandparents. And they're like, no, that's his grandmother. I'm like, whoa, hold on. And then he told me stories like, oh, she's 90, I think 90 something years old. I'm like, oh my God. The first, I grabbed the bride and the groom. I brought them to the side. I'm like, look, we need to take a photo with your grandmother. And we took it. And then I remember it was like a year later, she passed away. And that was a photo that they posted of her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, that's something that, people, I think we also have to be educators in a sense of like, hey, yeah, we're going to,
We are going to need to do some of those. Like I said, like there's no, like, if anybody tells you, as much as I started out, I was like a photojournalist and did like other general things. I did headshots and portraits, but my training in photography was for like photojournalism. And like, if I would tell people, like, and if anybody tells you, even early on, I knew you got to do portraits. Like, if anybody tells you they're 100% candid photographer and they only do like documentary style and they're not going to do, like, do not hire that person, because they're lying to you probably, or you're going to miss the photos that you like, some of these photos that you want. Like I said, while it's not my most exciting thing to do, for me personally, I know how important it is. And like, my parents both passed away in 2020. And like, some of the last photos we have of like a group of our whole family together. And like, it was from my wedding and, 12 years ago. So it's like, that we just getting people together because they lived in a different part of the country, having everyone,
hard,
and having a nice, professional, good photo of us together, because I would be going and visiting and not taking pictures. Like, I'm not doing the photos myself. But yeah, it's those are things that are important. That
it's not the award-winning photo. It's not the most,
right.
sometimes the best photo.
It's not glamorous.
It's the most. I find it's the most important photos.
Emotionally important.
Yeah,
I think it's one of those things that I've had also, like, I had done 2021. I had done this kind of like small wedding in Philly, and they had like 20, 30 people maybe. Went to a restaurant afterwards, and had their like roped off area, whatever, taking pictures. Beforehand I'd been talking to the the bride and her dad before the ceremony and all this stuff, and I got these great like candid photos of them like laughing together and like walking down the pier to their wedding ceremony. And like 2 months later, he died of a massive heart attack, and she like texted me and was like, "Can I use this photo for his memorial?" And it was a photo of him like laughing while they were talking before the ceremony. And I was like, "Absolutely. Is there anything else I can do to help with that?" And she's like, "No, I just really appreciate, having these pictures of him, like these like wonderful photos from the wedding." And I was like, yeah, those are things that are important. You need to like, that's one of the things, when you're getting into this business, you also need to understand is that this is one of those times in people's lives when their most important people are all getting together. So it is important to like document those people. While it might not be your most exciting thing, like, make sure that you are, doing that, because it is very, very important to your clients.
Yeah. And it's, and I always say, it's, for me, it's not just a transaction. Yes, it's a business. Yes, it's, their money's being exchanged, but it's more to that. It's not, because my couples, I have a lot of couples that are, couples that became great friends, and couples that I hang out with still, and others that you still keep in touch and so forth. But it's not just like, oh yeah, I think I remember every single couple that I've photographed since the beginning. It's not one of those things where like, oh, they were just a transaction. Oh, I don't remember shooting your wedding or anything like that. Which I hear sometimes where like, I hear people like, oh yeah, my photographer, I saw him and he didn't even recognize me. He didn't even remember he shot my wedding. Like, like, oh man, like, how that, hopefully that would never happen to me.
I have people
that's not a good,
not a good sign.
Not a good reaction.
I have people who I remember everybody too. I mean, I've done like 700 and something weddings, and I remember everybody.
Yeah, way more than.
And it's just like people will like write me an email, like same sort of thing. Usually, like it's 10 years later or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, my grandmother or my dad or my so and so passed away, and I'd love to have this picture." And they're like, "Do you still keep them?" And I, data's cheap at this point. I do keep an archive of stuff, and never charge anyone to access it. Yeah. If that's what it's for. But like, it's still like, they'll be like, "I don't know if you remember me. You shot my wedding." I'm like, yes, of course I remember you. Like, this is like,
I've gotten that. Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh, do you remember me? You shot my wedding, this and then they're giving me all this detail. I'm like, I don't even need all that detail. I know who you are. Right.
Well, there's the episode that's going to follow this is a commentary on a Hallmark movie, about a wedding photographer. And one of her first lines is, "I don't even remember the names of that couple we just photographed." And I'm like, "Oh, this is a bad sign. Why is this starting out like this is not good?" All right, I think we need to get into like how to actually get these. So if you're looking to actually get into photographing weddings, one of my pieces of advice, like if you haven't done it before, would be to start photographing couples. Honestly, it's like because you don't really have a portfolio at that point in time. I would say like, start putting the word out there with your friends, and to their friends to like start like basically like an engagement shoot, but just taking pictures of people so that you can get used to it and also develop some sort of portfolio of photographing, people in love. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I did, in terms of after I photographed that first wedding. I posted it on Instagram, not Instagram, Facebook, because Instagram wasn't a thing at that time. And then I was already posting like the baby stuff, but at this time it wasn't like, I think it wasn't a business yet. I was still just kind of like posting stuff on Facebook because that was a new thing. Like, oh man, people are posting photos on Facebook.
Right.
And then I got to when I started, like I photographed that first wedding, and then I'm like, you know what? Actually, I like that. I like that stuff. And I started then asking friends, hey, do you girlfriends, I'm like, hey, would you want to, I'll do some photos of you guys. Would you mind, being my models? And,
right.
And, I used that for a while. And then I booked the second wedding right after that first wedding, again, lower budget, and then 2, 3, 4. And then, it goes like, I think my year 2, I think I had my year 2, cause I consider that first wedding year 1,
yeah.
My year 2, I think I photographed like 15 weddings. So I picked up a lot of weddings. And then I think from there on, I was always like at least 20, 30. I got 30. I got up to like 40. And then recently, what is it? Not in 2021, I did 55 weddings. And last year I went back down to more normal, where like 30 something weddings.
Well, 2021 was the catch up year. It was like 2020.
But only 12 of those 55 were from the previous year, the COVID weddings.
Okay.
So it was pretty good. So it goes to a point where like, yeah, like, look, and if somebody asked me, I had people like, oh, or when did they get married, or, and I remember telling them, oh, no, these are my friends. I photographed them and that's another thing, some people say, fake it till you make it. Yeah. But don't lie.
Right.
Don't lie. Don't say like, oh, this is, because then you get caught in it. So,
right. And if they do follow you on Instagram or on Facebook or something, they see you with those people and they're like, oh, we've been friends for 20 years. And you're like, what? Yeah. Well, that was your friend? You lied to me. Yeah, exactly. If somebody asks you a specific question, and one of the things that I will say, if you're starting out and you go out and do like a styled shoot or like a shootout with people where they like get models, make sure that you say on your website or in Instagram or whatever that this is a faux shoot. This is not an actual wedding, because one of the biggest complaints I hear from couples is people like posting those things, and I can tell immediately if it's a styled shoot, just as a photographer. But like couples don't, and they see that, and then their expectations for their wedding day are it's going to be like this. I'm like, you're not going to have that amount of time to just focus.
You're not going to have that perfect lighting,
right?
You're not,
You want to 100%. Don't like, we've been, one of the things we've been talking about a lot, and I think we talked about before in our previous conversation, setting your expectations properly with the couple so that they don't feel like they're not getting what you discussed. Whereas things like I do, as far as like my editing, and people will be like, how soon will I get the photos back? I had somebody told me that, they can have them edited for me like, the next day. And I'm like, they're not going to, like, they're sending you a sneak peek of like 10 images. They're not editing the whole thing next day unless they've got, they're hiring an editor and spending like, unless you're spending like $30,000 on this, and part of that is,
we got some AI, AI that's editing the whole thing, and you're just sending it out. And
that's a discussion I'm having in another episode about AI. From what I've heard, that they don't, the editing, culling, not so bad. Editing, lots of problems.
I think it helps, but it's not a solution to kind of clean your hands and walk away.
Right.
I think there's I think there's still more, I think, maybe you could get there, but I think, maybe it saves you hours.
I think it would be, from what I've heard, I think it'll be better for like portrait sessions with like consistent lighting. You're going to have you're going to get a better result for a wedding where you've got like a bunch of different things. It's maybe not going to give you what you want.
Yeah.
All right. Next thing I will suggest for people who want to get into the wedding photography industry is go and second shoot for somebody. Get some experience actually working on a wedding where the pressure is not on you, because we both started out doing our own weddings, and I never worked with anybody else. And like, until like later on, until like I was like 5 years in or so. And part of me, like, I don't want to like become somebody else. I don't want to like become that photographer, but there were important lessons that I learned being around somebody else and seeing how they did things. Somebody who had a successful business, which I was like, yes, these are things that I started to pick up on, like, how they ran their portrait period of the day. And there was things like, don't do that. Or things that are like, oh yeah, you should do things that way. And I'm making the decision for myself, but seeing how the day runs. And also that gives you a sense, I think we were talking about it at the beginning, that these are long days. You get a sense of whether or not this is something you actually want to do as a career. If you're actually like going out and like, and you're not putting your name on the door yet, and saying like, oh, I'm a wedding photographer, and all I've ever done is shot my own weddings, and I've shot like 2 or 3 of them, and I don't realize like quite what I'm getting into yet. And it helps you, like I said, a little less pressure, on you, as like you're not the main person. You're not responsible for everything. In that sense, get out there and work with some other people. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, definitely. That's how you should get in. And, I would say I find that, when I get, where I found my second shooters, where I found my assistants were all, it started with like a community, like a Facebook group, and just knowing, getting to know people online, but then also in person, because, you go out there and network with other photographers or other people in the industry where, you get to, go mingle with people, go, it could be, at a studio, someone's studio. It could be at, a group that, get together at a restaurant just for some drinks, some food, and, or even like some of these, photography conventions and shows, and just going out there and meeting people. Because, the way I work, with, Greg said, when I thought, once I photographed that first wedding, I'm like, I need like an apprentice. I need to go, find someone. And I did reach out to a few photographers in the area. And, all of them say, some of them say, no, I'm not looking for any help. And then one said, oh yeah, I'll call you. And that call never came.
Right.
So, and I'm like, you know what? That's when I'm like, screw this. I'm going to find my own way. And I created, and what Craig said is, like you said, it's, it's good because you didn't copy anyone. You were molded by someone. You kind of found your own way, and you developed your own style. And I personally think that's the best way to do it, instead of trying to copy someone or do exactly as someone says. I think it's very important taking bits and pieces from everyone you work with and that you feel like works well, and then try and implement it in your own, or try and change it up and make it your own. But I think today's day and age, I think the easiest way to get into, the wedding industry is, one, by assisting, because everyone's looking for assistant. It's putting your ego aside, even if you think, I'm better than just assisting. I could photograph, I could do this, but you got to prove to that photographer that you can do it. And it's not like, this is a conversation I actually had a couple months ago with someone. I'm like, it's not about that you're a great photographer, or you know how to photograph, or you know how to assist. It's that trust issue, because if you're bringing someone new under your brand to a wedding, which can be 8 to 15 hours long, that person's going to be with you during that whole entire time. And if that person does not align, you start seeing things that doesn't align with you. You can't just send that person. You can send them home, but then you don't have an assistant.
Right.
So you have to, when you go out and you network with someone, and you start seeing this person online, you start creating a relationship where you kind of see where their head is at. You see, you know, that they can be trustworthy, or you know, people are like, oh yeah, I use so and so. They were great. They were there on time. You know, they helped me with this, that. They're wonderful. They're a great time during the whole wedding. So, you know, you build up a rapport with a group of people that then when people need someone like an assistant last minute or something, and you follow through and you show up, then that person, you've gained that person's trust. Now you just opened up a door for assisting, and then that assisting might become into a second shooting. Because the one thing all my second shooters, I've known my second shooters for multiple years. I think I don't have one second shooter. And I probably have only 5 second shooters that I've ever used in my 12 years. And, you know, all of them, none of them, I just kind of like, oh yeah, just come work with me that one day. It's like we built a relationship before they actually even came to help me out. Even my assistants, I don't have just like my assistants, I want to meet them before they actually come out for a session. And that's what I always start with the session.
At least like this. At least for an assistant, I would at least want to have, same thing. I want to meet you in person. At least we're having a face-to-face conversation via Zoom or something, so I can see you, how you're reacting to me, and like get a sense of who you are. Because as you mentioned, the biggest thing is trust. And there have been times where, you know, I learned the hard way.
You're going to show up on time. Like,
right. Are you going to be there? Are you going to dress professionally? Are you going to be there? And like, I've been hurt burned a few times by people who, you know, there's various things that have gone wrong over the years. Like, and I learned the hard way, you know, that I needed to establish a relationship with this person beforehand and kind of get a sense of who they are. And now it's like, if I need somebody in an emergency, I'm only taking recommendations from people I know.
Yeah.
I'm not just picking somebody else. Yeah. I've established that relationship with, you know, people who have second shot for me. And like most of my second shooters I've been working with for at least 5 years, some 10.
Yeah. We're on the same page.
And they're like, they have their own businesses. Sometimes they still second shoot for me. You know, we kind of have a rotation. But also, if I'm in need of somebody in a pinch, I'll ask them, because I know that they know what I need, and they, you know, they're not going to recommend somebody because we trust each other, because I've probably second shot for them sometimes or help them out. Like they, you know, also the other thing here is, all right, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'll hold on to that. Like you said, you need to know that this person is going to show up on time, represent your brand, and, you know, like in the way that you want it to be done. And, you know, they're going to do the work that you need done. So yeah, assisting. And I was going to bring that up as sort of like check the ego and come in, assist. And it's one of those ways that you can, if you are trying to get into this, you know, professionally, and you want to be like a wedding photographer or some other kind of photography, and you want to learn how the sausage gets made, you know, assist somebody.
I think you learn more by assisting than actually shooting. Because shooting, you got, you know, as a second shooter, you have the responsibility. Like, hey, I have to make sure I capture this. As an assistant, yes, you have a responsibility of making sure, you know, nothing's happening or helping with something. But there's a lot more time where you could just be the student and
learn
and take in as much information as you can.
And you want to learn off-camera flash? Assist somebody who uses off-camera flash a lot. Like, you'll learn real fast, like a couple of gigs, and you'll have a sense of how it's done and how they're doing their setups.
Where the lighting is going, where it is placed, like, right? You know,
yeah, you get to learn those things like from somebody else without paying for a class. But that's the way, and I'm going to use this as a stepstone to like, how do you get those jobs as an assistant or as a second shooter or whatever, like when you're making those steps up. You mentioned Facebook groups. I think Facebook groups are underutilized by a lot of people, as far as like, you know, when they ask me like, oh, how do I get into wedding photography? Like, go into these groups, find them, do a search. There's probably one that's local to you. Yeah. Pick out and also research the people around you. The thing that I hate the most, and I don't know, I'm guessing you get these all the time too, are these mass emails sent to like 30 photographers, and all of our emails are in the to area, like saying like, hey, my name's Dave. I'm a photographer. I'm looking for a job as an assistant or a second shooter for weddings. Here's the link to, here's my gear that I use. And I'm just like, okay, why do you want to work with me?
Yeah.
Like, be specific. Like, don't just send out, like, if you're just mass emailing people, you're not going to get any, like, flattery works for everybody. So find the thing, like, find the people that you think you want to work with because you like their work, and tell them why. Like, send them an individual. You can create like a boilerplate for your emails where you're saying like, hey, my name is so and so. This is my experience. You can review my work here, but also like include some personal things in there about the person you're talking about. Like, hey, I follow you on Instagram, or I've been looking through your website, and this is the style that I really like, or I really loved this wedding that you shot, and I want to learn how to do that. And is it possible that I could assist you? Or if you're in need of a second shooter in an emergency, like, we want to, let's talk. And don't expect them to like hire you immediately. Like, yes, we're going out this weekend. Like, put the time in. This is what networking is. Like, you've brought up networking a number of times. Like, networking is having a mutually beneficial relationship. It's not just about like getting that your name in front of somebody else and then never helping them until they're paying you. Like, we're trying to like, I learned this with wedding planners. What service can I provide outside of like getting you photos from the wedding day, which is like a big thing that you're providing people that everybody wants, but to like stand out from other photographers is like, finding things that I could do for them outside of that helped them in their business. Like, do you need new headshots? Do you need something from something else? Like, is there something I can provide for your team? Like some training on how we do the portrait sessions, like work together and like have a discussion about that. It's the same when you're trying to get hired by a wedding photographer. Figure out like the things that you like about their work and talk to them, build that rapport before they're going to like take their chance on you. They're more likely to take a chance on you than just saying when you throw, 60, email addresses into, in like, here's my copy and paste. Here's
it's not even a blind email. It's like, just put all the emails.
Oh, man, that's the worst. If you're going to do it, at least blank carbon copy me. Like I'll give them like a step above, but like I am immediately deleting your email, and I'm probably never going to hire you because I'm going to remember your name. Like, you're the guy who just gave my email address to like 80 different people, and I'm probably going to get some spam just because you included me in your, now I'm, stuck in a bunch of people's, it's true. Actually, I started wondering why I started getting like these newsletter emails from other photographers. And I realized that it was because people were putting my email address into these emails, and it just like their address book was just like picking up my email address, and they were putting me into their newsletter. I'm like, hey, I never signed up for your newsletter. And they're like, oh, well, my thing automatically, scans for new address. Like, well, I didn't. That's spam. So don't do that. Don't just automatically call people's email addresses. The other thing I would say is really important when you're starting out in this is learning the business side of this job, because it was something that I really didn't know a good deal about. Like, but you're doing the books, and you're paying your taxes and all of that fun stuff. There's the whole, like, what's my advertising budget? Where am I advertising? Am I advertising? Am I banking on word of mouth? Because that's sort of how things usually start, is word of mouth. And there was a time when you could just put up, as long as you had a Facebook page, and you could spend $20 on a Facebook ad and you'd get 50 jobs all of a sudden. Like, but those days are gone. And you have to think about,
still good to get all those free listings and the Knot and the Wire. Be on there and
be in places.
The more you're on something, or your name is your website is on a platform, or the better. But and if it works for you, great. But if you feel like you need something else, find which ones, talk to other photographers, see which ones are the better ways of gaining leads.
Right.
And you mentioned something about having a relationship with planners. they're a great way to get some, some leads and some work as well. So
Planners and venues, I think, are the best places to start getting leads, but that's after you've kind of established yourself a little bit, because they're not going to just recommend you to somebody
on a newbie.
I've done 5 weddings, and are you going to recommend me? No, they're not going to recommend you, and that's a good place to avoid sending your stuff until you have a portfolio,
or finding a planner who is just starting out as you are, and you guys could recommend each other.
Right. Yes. Find other people who are in their industry or in the same place as you. And as far as networking, one last thing on that sort of subject, like I said, most of the vendors are looking for photos of their work. And it is like, while venues and planners are probably going to be the ones who give you the most recommendations, you never know where they're going to come from. I always send like a few like good photos of things directly to vendors, like bands have recommended jobs to me before, because they're the first thing, the most important thing to the couple was the music. And I've had florists who, guys have recommended me, or makeup artists, who recommended me, because it's just like whoever the person was booking first then asked for recommendations on things. But it's like, it's good to maintain those relationships and give them a little something. And when you do it, when you send that, I'm like, hey, I'm always like, appreciate referrals. That's to keep business going. My recommendation is, always tell people your business is always helped by referrals, and any referrals they can leave or give to you will help continue your business to grow and be there. Start that from the first wedding that you do. Like, I wish I had learned to ask that earlier. The worst they can do is not recommend you, but if they don't know that recommending you to other people is a thing, that you're looking for that, because I had for a number of years, I was like, why am I not getting a lot of referrals? And it was because people just thought that I wasn't asking people to specifically tell anybody who's getting married, give me a call, or to look at my work or whatever. I wasn't saying anything, and they were just like, oh, well, we see all these photos on Instagram or Facebook, and we just figure you're busy. You're probably already booked. Not thinking oh, he would appreciate, getting more work. It's the sort of, you can kind of shoot yourself in the foot with social media, making people think that you are not available, and telling them hey, yeah, just have your friends send me an email. We'll see if we're a good fit for one another or whatever. You got to keep that stream going.
You got to keep that communication. Yeah, definitely. And like you said, couples don't know. Sometimes it's you think, oh, wouldn't it be obvious? And something, no, people are not thinking that. So, and sometimes when you do ask her, hey, can you leave me a review, or, your experience with me, and like, oh my God, yes,
right.
And they're like, oh, I never even thought of that.
Always ask for reviews.
It's especially now, reviews, people, it's so easy. And it costs nothing. It costs them 5 minutes of their time to sit there and write something nice that they genuinely, really, really had a great experience with you. Right. Because, some people are all about the reviews,
Make it easy for them to do it too. When I found that, when I just said, oh, if you want to leave me a review on Google or The Knot or WeddingWire or whatever, or Facebook, that would be great. And the thing is, when I sent out that email asking hey, it's really helpful to me to get reviews. Here are the 3 places that are the best places for me to get reviews. Here's the link for Google. Here's the link for The Knot. Here's the link for whatever, so that I don't make them work for it. Make it easy for them. Here's the links. You can just click on that, leave a review. It'll take you just a couple minutes. Making it as easy as possible for them is one of those things. But I always ask for referrals the minute somebody books. I'll just be like, hey, because people get married in waves. I found the wave of weddings kind of goes through a group. As soon as they book me, I'll be like, hey, just a reminder, I love referrals. If you know anybody, and then it's after I will say something probably as we start the closer up to the date planning, I'll be like, oh, just a reminder, referrals. And then one more time, right after I deliver the pictures. Hey, hope you loved these pictures. refer me to anybody you know. Because that way it's repetition. People learn through repetition, but also they're reminded that, oh yeah, this helps. And that has become so kind of like not it's ingrained in my process, but not pushy. Like I'm not pushing like, hey, I absolutely need you to refer people.
I must
Oh,
get
yeah.
referrals.
Or I will. The funny thing is, I will see people at another like at a wedding, and I'm like, I didn't hear from their friend's wedding. I didn't get a referral though, and I will like they'll take a picture, and I'll because they look great, they're having fun. I'm like, oh, looks like fun and whatever, and I'll like it on Instagram, and I'm not being passive aggressive. It's like, and the funny thing is, they'll send me a message and they're like, oh man, we referred you to them, and their photographer was terrible. Like we just had no fun like getting our pictures taken, and I'm like, oh, well, that happens. Ha ha ha, like, but I don't like, I see it and I'm like, okay. But I genuinely am liking it. I think they think, why didn't we refer Casey? No, I don't care. Yeah, kind of like, let's kind of close it up here. I think that, like we've given some good advice as far as like how to set yourself up for success. Be ready also to scale your business. Yeah. One more thing that just struck my mind, is get yourself a client relationship management software. There's a lot of different ones. I use Pixify. I'll put a link to it in the episode notes, but having something that can keep track of your leads, your client relationships, your contracts. I don't know if you use a CRM or.
Yeah. And it's easier. And I wish I did it when I first started because it's so much harder to then implement something, when you're like already established and you have like a lot of weddings. So what I found is if I knew about this right in the beginning, and I would have probably, why do I need it? I don't have many weddings. Believe me, if you really feel like you're serious about this and you want to go, you want to take this to a different level, you really want to do this as a career, I would highly, highly recommend you just get, there's so, like you said, there's so many. There's Tabe, there's Pixify, there's 17 Hats. There's so many new ones now.
It's hard to keep track. When I started out, there was nothing. I'm just saying that I had a database that I had created in like Microsoft Base or whatever it was. It was just like, and I think before that I just had an Excel spreadsheet that I created with people's names and numbers and the date of the wedding and their email address. Get yourself like this saved. Once I implemented it, once it was available, it was a thing that was there. Made my life so much easier. And I like the amount of time I spent working on like that stuff, like invoicing, like sending invoices to couples.
All automated for you.
Yeah. All those things. Also like sending questionnaires, which is something, I will say like you should be doing before the wedding, sending a questionnaire, like about the details of the day and like finding out things and just getting to know your clients. One of the things I always do before the engagement session is send them a questionnaire, like learning about them. How'd you guys, like, let's get a detailed story on how you met and what things you like to do. What was your favorite trip you took together? Those sorts of things, like getting to know one another, so that we have a better rapport on the day of the wedding or the day of the engagement shoot. And I kind of know what their mindset is.
I started doing something for this season is I'm getting on a Zoom with my couple and before their engagement session, just so I could really know like what's their goal for the, of course, what they, for engagement session, but really kind of get to know them a little better so that when we finally start shooting, I think I have a better, it's less, I think it's a quicker, connection than like, okay, let's see how the first half hour goes. And
right.
Then, so that's something I'm, and this goes to the same thing with, asking the questions. So I'm going to try to, and then also assisting them like, with wardrobe and what they're looking for, setting expectations for the engagement session. I think that all kind of, helps.
Yeah. I think that those are things that I talk about wardrobe in that questionnaire as well. Like, what are you thinking you're going to wear? And, we'll follow it up with a Zoom meeting to like go over stuff specifically before that. But I think it's so important to have a CRM so that you can like manage all of that information. It's like, when I started using Pixify and I was just like, oh man, I can keep track of like all of our like dates.
Like how much money you're making.
Right. And where you're spending money on, what you're spending money on. Oh, it's gear, it's rentals, it's advertising or whatever it is. And like, then you can really track like, oh, and one of my favorite things about it is tracking leads. Where are the leads coming from? Because it's one of those things I always ask people, like, well, how did you find me? Google search, my website. Was it a blog post on a wedding blog? Was it from a planner? Was it from somebody else? Knowing those things gives you a better sense. And I wish I had known these things early on to like track them. I would have like the progression. I feel like the progression would have been easier in my career if I had known to ask these questions and get this information and like put it all together, because now I can see not only where I get the most leads from, but which leads convert the most, like which leads convert into people who are going to book, who are the people, and also the people who I like we talked about at the very beginning, the people who match up with your style. Am I getting those people from word of mouth? Most of my word of mouth people are the people who like 100% match up, because like the couples who are referring me to somebody else, and they're like, hey, this is what Casey does. This is what Leandro does. Like, this is their style. This is what we really loved about it. And the people go like, oh yeah, that's really what I want for my wedding. Like that is the most like spot on referrals generally, as opposed to like the Knot, where I'm just getting like people like, oh, we liked your pictures. And we get a sense from your website or whatever. They don't, if they're contacting me through the Knot, they generally have not gone to my website and like figured out who I am. But yeah, like for other stuff, like you find out where you should be spending your time. Should I be spending my time on Instagram? Did they find me on Instagram? Where you're getting your most interaction and most people coming to you, and people who are ready to spend the money and sign on the dotted line, because eventually, like, my wife always reminds me, like, it's not done until they've signed the contract and like sent the deposit, the retainer in, which is always like something like, oh, I had to temper my excitement. I'm like, oh, they want to book. No, they if they really want to book, they will sign that contract. So as we finish up, do you have any like parting advice for people who are looking to get into wedding photography?
Yeah, just set any ego or any to the side, and work with whoever gives you a chance. If you're at the point where like you've reached out to people and you can't find anybody, and don't be too picky than who you want to work with. I think a lot of times people tell, oh, be picky with who you want to work with, but if you don't have people who you're going to work with,
Right.
How can you be picky with something that you don't have?
Yeah, until you don't know.
Yeah, until just be as long as someone's willing to take you in and work with you. Like I said, you don't have to do everything that whatever they do. It has to be 100% like, okay, yeah, this is the right thing to do. You're going to be able to, as your experiences you have with them, you're going to be able to, okay, they do this really well, or hey, this is something that they seem like they're not doing very well, so maybe I have to find out, I have to find someone who does this really well, or learn how to do this really well,
right?
Because I know this person's not doing this really well. And it's hard to find someone that does everything well. You're never going to find, I don't think there's ever like the perfect photographer that does business really well, that does, the technical aspect of photography really well. Because I see there's some people that are amazing at businesses, but then their photos are not. And then there's people that are amazing at taking pictures, and their businesses. And then there's great people that are great at the experience that the client has, but their photos aren't really
right.
So you have to kind of, in the beginning, be open to everything. Go in with open mind. Like I'm going to say it again, network. Get to places. Join these groups, Facebook groups. If there's any type of things happening locally in your community, like there's always, local to us, Unique Photo, the super, the camera store, in Fairfield, they have like events always happening, classes and things like that. If you see something that you might be interested to you, join. And I think I don't know if it's still the same, but they used to have something where it was like, they would hold like, it's like a $20 hold or $25 hold, but then they give it back to you as like a unique gift card. I know they used to do that, and the class is free. So there's a lot of stuff like that happening. You just got to go out there and find it, especially now with like all this COVID stuff, kind of, I think in the rearview mirror. There's a lot of free stuff happening. So just go out there, even if you don't know anybody, it's a great opportunity to get people to know you, introduce yourself to people, you can still, try walking into somebody's studio,
right. Or I would contact them first.
Try going in there. And I always say, what's the worst thing that somebody could say? No.
And that's, I think the most important lesson learned, is that, when it comes to reaching out to other people to network,
be persistent,
be like, follow up. If somebody says, hey, I'm going to get back to you about a job, like as an assistant or whatever, follow up with them, because I may have forgotten, like I may have genuinely been interested in talking to you, but make them say no. At that point, don't make them.
Just give you an example of someone that was persistent. I had this one photographer who was very persistent. He reached out to me on email. Hey, so I'm friends with so-and-so, a bride that I was photographing. Hey, would you, do you need any help? I would love to assist you. Or I'd love to second shoot for you or whatever. And I'm like, again, sorry, unfortunately I'm not looking for anyone, but I will, I always say, be nice and I'll keep you in mind. And this guy was so persistent, kept on. And then I'm like, he would email me, and then he would get me on Instagram. And then I got to a point, I think he got it. He's like, you know what? Look, I'll do anything you want. I just want to be there on the wedding day. I just want, even if it's a second pair of hands, whatever you want me to do, I will do. You tell me, I'll do. And I'm like, you know what? Let me speak to this guy.
Yeah.
We get on a call, super nice guy. Seemed like, he'd be cool. And I said, look, I have my assistant. I have my second shooter. If you want to come, I might need some help with like a second pair of hands for maybe a shot that I do, or I need a second, somebody do it behind the scenes. He's like, look, I'll do whatever you want. He ended up coming. Great. He was great. He was nice. He ended up then, I brought him along for some engagement sessions, wedding assisted. And then finally I was in a rut. What was it, last year? He's a good shooter, but I've never, shot with him. I'm like, you know what? I need a second photographer. I couldn't find someone. Had him come in. And the rest is history. Like, he's second shot for me a couple more times after that. This year, he's second shot for me. So it's the persistency that he had, right. Or else he would have been just, if he didn't kind of be persistent, he would have never assisted me. He would never second shoot with me. And he was persistent, and he didn't take no for an answer. And he wasn't like he was aggressive. He was just kind of, he was always letting me know, hey, I'm here.
Right. I'm available. Available. Just letting me know let me know you're available. Remind me who you are.
And he said, look, whatever I need. He's like, look, whatever you need. I just want to be there because it was his friend's wedding.
Right. And I think that's,
he was great.
I think that's what's also important there is, like, again, what is your connection to it? Why do you want, like I said before, why do you want to work with me? What is the reason behind, like, wanting to be my assistant or second shooter? As opposed to, I'm just getting back to this huge list of people that I'm like throwing out my name to try to get a second shooting job. Because that is like telling me that all you're interested in is going out, like making a few $100 or whatever. Yeah. And that, like, you're not interested in like why working for me specifically, because I need people who want to work with me, who want to like we talked about at the beginning of this, people who gel with you as the type of work that you do. They're representing your brand. I don't want somebody who's just like going to show up, because I've made that mistake of hiring people and having them come in like, I'm wearing a white t-shirt and a pair of jeans, and no, you're not going to be working with me today. This is not, you're not representing me. Be like, make the effort, whether it's with clients or with other photographers, to get to know them and to, connect.
Ask questions.
Yeah.
Like, if they didn't tell, if they don't tell you anything about wardrobe or like, ask the question, like, oh, what would you like me to wear? How would you like me to represent your brand? And a lot of times I go through, like, cause I heard so many bad stories. Like, I'll tell, like, if they're new, I'll be like, even for, I'm like, just make sure, you're not handing out any business cards.
Yes.
Of your
I
own.
had that happen.
you're not wearing sneakers, you wear shoes. And I said, you can wear, because now these like Kohan sneakers, I'm like, those are fine as long as they're clean, make sure, you're wearing, some comfortable dress pants, no t-shirt, has to have a collar, if you want to wear a jacket, you can wear a jacket. That's up to you. And I tell them like, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And I kind of, I let them know, like, don't ask questions in front of the client. Like, I'm photographing the bride and you just, hey, why are you doing that? Just, on the side, you can, after I'm done with the shot, you can ask me as many questions as you like, or the next day or whatever, but don't, don't say, and one thing now, especially now, don't get political or don't butt into any conversations that couples are having. Right. Political, religious, like,
even with not your place.
Thing, like, I'm like, it's not your place. If they ask you for your opinion, I always say, if they ask you for your opinion, you just either be neutral, or if whatever they're saying, you just nod and you agree with whatever they say.
Keep it to yourself.
At the end of the day, at the end of the day, like, I tell them, like, at the end of the day, my clients, my couple's affiliation to whatever political, religious, COVID, beliefs that they have is none of my business, So I don't want that to be a factor if they're going to book me or they're not going to book me, because it shouldn't be. So I try to make it that, like, that was like when COVID hit, I had to make that decision. Like, I'm going to tell my people, like, look, we try to be neutral. You do not get into the conversation. Do not, because there was, I was hearing some stories of people going back and forth with couples or even guests at weddings. And I'm like, nah, it's not going to happen at my wedding.
Yeah. And that's one of those things, like, where you're, again, it's expected of you as you're an employee of of somebody's company at that point. When you get to be running your own wedding photography, but you can do whatever you want. But when you're working for somebody else, that is not your decision to make. All right. This episode of the Nerdy Photographer Podcast is brought to you by USB Memory Direct. USB Memory Direct has been providing custom USB flash drives and packaging to photographers and businesses for over 15 years. Custom USB drives make great promotional products for effective branding, which is extremely important to the success of your business. Every time someone uses your USB drive, they'll see your logo and connect with your brand. Whether you're looking for an elegant tool to deliver photos to your photography clients or a personalized USB business card to create brand exposure in a unique way, they have a drive to suit your need. Included in every order are USB 3 options for lightning fast transfer speeds, free printing or laser engraving of your logo, lifetime warranty, free shipping to Canada and the United States with rush shipping available, as well as color-matched Pantone shells to stay perfectly on brand. Check them out over at usbmemorydirect.com. That's usbmemorydirect.com. And our listeners can use code NERDY10. That's NERDY10, all capital letters, to receive 10% off their order. USB drive orders only, and discounts can not be combined and can only be used once.
Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up there. And now we have our useless information for this episode. Leandro, did you know that you are more likely to get bitten by another human being in New York City than you are to ever be bitten by a shark anywhere?
Wow. I can believe that. especially nowadays with, like, all these situations we hear in the news with New York City people being attacked. And
I think that statistic was even before, like, all of this.
Even before.
Yeah. Like, but it's,
Well, sharks don't really, they don't really attack humans. It's like, it's a mistake. They take, they think you're a fish or something, right?
They think you're a seal or something else that they're interested in. And that's not their thing to, like, there's either something wrong that they're not eating normally, or like you've put yourself in a position where you're food. They think that you're food. And, we're not talking to sharks and saying, like, hey, why'd you bite me? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I noticed that you were a human and I thought I'd attack you. Yeah, the number of the percentage risk of getting bitten by a shark is actually fairly low. It just gets sort of sensationalized, and people are like, "Oh, I'm so afraid of sharks." Yeah, I avoid them personally, but like, I am more concerned about people in New York City than I am about sharks. Leandro, thank you for coming on. Can you let
It was my pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Can you let the listeners know where to find you?
Find me at Leandro Silva Photography on Instagram and leandrodasilva.com on the web.
I will include those links in the episode notes. Leandro, again, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast if you don't already, and please leave us a review anywhere you can, but especially on Apple Podcasts if you have the time, because it helps other people discover this show. You can also follow The Nerdy Photographer on social media at The Nerdy Photo on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. That's at The Nerdy Photo. I hope you enjoyed my talk with Leandro da Silva about how to get into the wedding photo biz. One thing I would like to add that we didn't discuss is regarding gear. You should have 2 camera bodies if you are going to photograph a wedding, especially if you're shooting by yourself. You don't need to own 2, but you should have 2 with you. Rent one if you need to. Have a backup. Borrow one from a friend. But do not go to a wedding, especially by yourself, with only 1 camera. However many petapixel or f-stopper stories you've seen about people photographing a wedding with their phone camera, that is not an acceptable replacement. Your clients are not going to be happy if you're suddenly shooting with your phone instead of a camera. Carry backup. Speaking of backup, do you think I could tag along with you on your next job, Ragamir? We'll get an idea what it's like. Oh, I have to sign a waiver. I guess that tracks. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy.
You better listen.
Hello there, Nerdy Photographer listeners. Do you have a website or do you need one? Well, let me tell you, you should be using SiteGround to host your website. I used different hosts for many, many years, and I dealt with so many problems. Terrible support, slow loading speeds, all sorts of attacks on my site that I couldn't deal with. But when I switched to SiteGround, my problems have gone away. I haven't had to worry about my site once in the 5 years that I've been using SiteGround. And right now you can get 80% off hosting and a free transfer of your website. Hosting can start from as low as $2.99 a month. $2.99 a month. That's so cheap. And it's so good. I wouldn't recommend it to you if I didn't use it myself. Head over to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/SiteGround. That's nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/SiteGround. Or you can click on the link in the episode notes and get over there. 80% off hosting and a free transfer. You're not going to regret it.